That would be great. Thank you. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this British Pain Society webinar. I'm Joanne Lloyd and I'm chairing tonight's session. I'm representing the CRIISP research team, of who you will meet shortly, some of them, and we'll explain the rest of the team as well within the webinar and the slides. So it's great to see, well, I can't see you, but I think I will be able to hear you at some point. Next slide, please, Sharon. Great. So the British Pain Society is the UK's oldest and largest multidisciplinary organisation, focused on improving pain care and promoting research to improve understanding and treatment. And today we're here on a research front. It's also promoting joined-up, person-centred approaches. Next slide, please. Yep, so I think this one is really just letting you know about the conference next year in Harrogate. So maybe you would like to take a note of that. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure we probably all know this, so I'll just run through it really quickly. As you know, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube. And please do complete the evaluation form at the end, which you'll be sent, and then you will get your certificate for CPD. Next slide, please. So now what I'm going to do is hand over to Carolyn and she will introduce herself. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Jo. Okay, so thanks everybody for, I was going to say venturing out on this cold November evening. Actually, you haven't ventured out and it's not really cold, but it is dark and it is rainy here in Cheshire. So I'm Carolyn Graham. I'm Professor of General Practice Research at Keele University. Joanne, you've already introduced yourself. You're Vice Chair of our CRIISP Public Advisory Group, and what that means will become obvious shortly. And then we've also got Sharon Grieve, who's currently a Research Fellow at the University of the West of England, and we're part of the CRIISP team. So I think everybody who's on this call knows that patient and public involvement, the voice of the patient or the voice of the person with lived experience, is really important in any research. And we're going to talk about the how we manage to have the voice of people with lived experience of pain as integral to our CRIISP programme. So we're going to explain all about the different work packages within CRIISP, the different levels that people with experience of pain were integrated into CRIISP, and hopefully there's going to be some lessons or top tips for future researchers. So this is what we're going to cover in our presentation today. So we're going to share our vision and also reflect on whether we achieve that. I'm going to start off by telling you what CRIISP is all about. Oh, can we go back? It seems to be going on its own. Thank you. We're going to describe how we recruited all our people with lived experience to the CRIISP programme, practicalities of running the programme. We're going to mention some of the impacts of our public involvement. We're going to talk about how we sustained public involvement over the duration of the programme, which is running to 5 years. And we're going to talk about the feedback we've had from our public involvement and also lessons learned. But the key aim for CRIISP was to ensure that the views of people with experience of chronic pain are integrated throughout the programme. Just a couple of things, because actually the text is quite small. So APDP is the Advanced Pain Discovery Platform, which CRIISP is a part of. And CRIISP stands for the Consortium to Research Individual, Interpersonal and Social Influences on Pain. So a really broad programme of work, from basic data science to a lot of qualitative work and ethnography and testing of practical interventions. Next slide, please. So what does CRIISP consist of? So I've already mentioned it's part of APDP, and we were funded by UKRI and Versus Arthritis. It started off when we put our application in as a 4-year research programme led by the University of Bath in collaboration with other universities across the UK. So it's a multidisciplinary, multi-institution programme. As I say, we're actually into our 5th year because we've got some extensions. And what we're going to focus on is the work of our public contributors. And when we put the application in, we made sure that we stated and emphasised that our public contributors would be involved across all the work packages involved in CRIISP. And what is really important is that our public contributors have actually influenced our research questions, so right from the application, and they carry on influencing each of the work packages to enable us to perhaps shed a bit more light on what's influencing pain. Is it well, it'll be a combination of individual, interpersonal, and social factors. Next slide, please. We've got a big team, and I think this is really important to stress that quite often patient and public involvement, or involving people with lived experience, or public and communities, whatever we call it, it's often done on a shoestring. It's often the budget that gets cut when you're trying to tinker with an application. But we were very clear when we put our application in that our public involvement activity had to be really well funded. We had to have a good budget that we could support all our activities. So you'll see that we've got senior researchers, we've got research associates, we've got some admin support, which is really important, and we've got our lived experience. So Colin Wilkinson on the right helped us write the application, so he was a project co-applicant, and then Ian Taverner and Joe, who's here tonight, are on our CPAG, our public advisory group, and work across all the rest of the work. Next slide, please. So in our original application, we had 7 work packages, and public involvement is one of those work packages. So again, that's slightly different than you often see in big programmes of work, where public involvement can often be seen as an add-on or as an optional extra. We've then got a work package that you can see on the right about integrating all the work packages, and that's not necessarily a work package on its own, but it is linked with public involvement because it's really important that we make sure that all our work packages, all the dissemination, all the findings actually has public involvement so that it's relevant to the person with pain. So we've got a work package which focuses on individual factors, so how our own internal thoughts and feelings might affect pain. We've got a work package that focuses on interpersonal, so how our interactions with other people might affect pain. And then societal, how the world around us might affect pain and how we deal with it. Then I mentioned we've got data science work going on, so cohort and data capture. And in the data capture, we've got exciting technological interventions, sensors, mobile technology. So a really broad range of work, and public involvement goes across all those 5 work packages. Next slide, please. We've tried to diagrammatically represent where our public contributors fit. So you can, at the bottom we've put our public contributors, but actually they work all the way through. So our chair and our vice chairs, so Joanne and Ian, are public contributors, but they lead a lot of the work that our public contributors do. We have our consortium public advisory group that Joe and Ian lead. And then we have work package delivery groups where we've got public contributors in each of those groups. We have co-chairs in those groups as well. And I think one of the key messages about having co-chairs, people to support each other. Somebody's available if somebody else is off sick or not able to attend a meeting or complete a task. But I think that mutual support is really important. And so we've got public contributors contributing all the way through, and not a hierarchy, even though we've displayed it, because actually it's what we want to try and emphasize tonight is that our public contributors are equal to our researchers and project leads, and so it's definitely a partnership, not this is an additional activity that you have to do as a researcher. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to make a start on our recruitment process. So right at the beginning, which I think we were sort of in COVID at the time during lockdown and restrictions, we knew that we wanted to have a really strong group of public contributors. So we outlined a role description, job description. We made sure that we had governance arrangements, that we had employment contracts. We advertised the role across a range of media because what we really wanted to do was to attract a diversity of applicants to these roles. We didn't want to have what you can often see is middle-aged people who have got a bit of time on their hands, and that's not to denigrate the fact that middle-aged people can, with time on their hands, can contribute, but we wanted a range of people with different ages, with different painful conditions, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. We then advertised, and we think our advert was quite straightforward and easy to read. And we invited people to contact us and have an informal chat about what the role would actually entail, what the responsibilities were, and what they might expect from us in terms of support and what we would expect from them. And we also had to make sure that they were reimbursed appropriately. And what we decided to do was have casual worker contracts set up with the university for those people who did wish to be paid. And so they had to have right to work checks. So it was actually quite a long process, but we think it was a very robust process to recruit to our public contributor network. We then spoke to people once they'd been appointed. Which of the work packages do you want to work in? Are you more interested in the society? Do you want to look at data and analysis of data? Would you like to be involved in testing these new sort of digital technologies? We also, and this is a little box that talks about training, we had a lot of training that might have been about how to use Teams, how to use your computer, how to join meetings, how to look at a research paper. We developed a jargon buster list of all the things that they might hear in research meetings so that they didn't go in feeling, oh my goodness, I don't know what these researchers are talking about. They were primed. We also had, and I think I might be straying into what Sharon's going to talk about, so I shall stop after this, but we also offered training as we went along. So it wasn't just start, have some induction and training, and then carry on. We offered training as we went along. And I think I'm going to hand over to Sharon now. Sharon might have frozen. Sharon, are you there?
I think she
I
has frozen. Maybe we'll just give her
froze,
a minute.
yeah. Oh, Sharon, are you
Oh,
back? You look like you were frozen. Are we trying to hand
wow,
over
I
to
don't know. I
you?
must have lost signal. I'm so sorry.
So I think we're handing over to you
Oh,
now.
lovely. Great. Hopefully my internet will hold out then. Um,
So
yes, so thanks, Carolyn. So yes, I just wanted to talk a little more about how we promoted diversity within the network. And Carolyn's already mentioned the adverts, which we hope, caught people's eye. And we worked with our public contributor leads, Joe and Ian, to make sure that the language was accessible. We shared the adverts with lots of different organisations, so some of the paying charities and some of the local networks. We'd like to have even done more to promote it, but we had a tight timeline to get the network up and running. And some of the organisations wanted quite lengthy forms, and some of them required payment, which we, couldn't necessarily fund within our budget. But I think we managed to get a good mix of organisations to promote the opportunity. And as Carolyn said, people were directed to finding out more. We had a bespoke CRIISP website where we held a lot of information about the rollout line, frequently asked questions. There was a Find Out More video, which was made by our public contributor leads, which was a great way to just hear about the project a bit more informally rather than having to read, a lengthy document. And hopefully that made it more accessible. And then we had information on, the practicalities. And I think Carolyn's already described the casual worker contracts. Some people did choose to work voluntarily, but we had a lot of practical stuff so that they could really consider if this was right for them and how they can get involved. And we were, tried to be really flexible and accommodating, and we accepted all applicants because we wanted to get people from a range of backgrounds and experiences. So how did we do? So overall, we recruited 36 people to the CRIISP project as public contributors. We had mostly women and mostly aged between 35 and 64, which is probably not really a surprise to you. We had 26% of people who didn't identify as white British, so from different ethnicities. And we were very pleased that we did manage to, across all those research teams, those work packages which Carolyn mentioned, we did manage to get a mix of genders and ethnicity across those groups. That was really important to have that representation working with each research team. Most people, as I say, were happy to be paid, and 3 people chose not to be. And over the period of the and we had 31 people who experienced pain, 2 who cared for someone who experienced pain, and 3 people met both of those categories. So there was a really nice mix of people. And over the duration of the project, we did have 10 people withdraw, and that wasn't really surprising. It was a long project, life happens, circumstances change. If people wanted to pause, we were really happy to let them do so. And some people did that, and some people decided actually, circumstances didn't allow them to participate. But we managed to have 28 people who've continued to work with us. This is a really lovely image, I think, of capturing how we work together with our public contributors. And this was the kind of creative inspiration of Ian, our chair, and the image is by Tom Bailey. And you can see there our public contributors in the left corner with their hands on the red button, really powering up that battery, which is feeding into all of those different work packages, all of those different research teams. And I think what it really captures is the power of public involvement and how they were really partnered with the researchers throughout. And, it was at every stage of the CRIISP project. So, I like the energy in this image. So over the duration of the project, it was really important to sustain involvement and keep people engaged. And we did that in a number of ways. There's an example here of a newsletter. We had newsletters which went out 3 monthly, and they were really a great way of just providing updates, capturing all the information in one place, talking about not only the individual projects within CRIISP, but the wider overview of CRIISP and linking to dissemination activities, for example, publications and blogs and any resources. We really wanted to utilize the expertise of the people we were working with. So there were opportunities to get involved in activities kind of outside their specific research group. And we tried to make it a bit of fun. We'd have a focus on one of the team and a recipe. And so that was a great way to kind of keep people updated. In the bottom left-hand corner is the laptop. And I know Carolyn's mentioned technology, but we used Microsoft Teams. As Carolyn said, we were just out of the pandemic. So all the meetings were online. And that was a great way of being really inclusive and having people from a really wide geographical area across the UK. It's pretty easy to use, and but we did provide tech support for those that were perhaps struggling or just wanted a bit of an intro to how to use it. We also utilised the Teams channel facility, and we had a specific public involvement Teams channel where we could put resources so that people didn't have to hold that information on their own computers, and they could just dip in and out of it, and find meeting information, summaries of meetings, all of that kind of thing. We also could provide equipment if people needed it, and one gentleman asked for a webcam, so we were delighted to be able to supply that to him. And then just above, there's the image of the Mentimeter, which is really there to remind me to tell you about all the regular feedback we captured from our public contributors and the researchers, and the fact that we actioned that. We really tried to listen and take that on board. And I'll refer you to our publication, which talks a bit more about that and all our lessons learned, and there's a link to that later on. And then finally, I just wanted to kind of expand a bit on the workshops and the events that we had in the interim. So through a project of this length, as you can imagine, sometimes there was a lot of activity and sometimes it was the pace just slowed a little bit. We wanted to keep people engaged. So we'd have different events and workshops. And one of them was called Reconnect. And it was about bringing our public contributors together to sort of strengthen that sense of community. And it was co-produced by our public contributors. So we really wanted them to tell us what they wanted from that session. And I think it was a good opportunity to kind of refresh motivation, to allow them, enable them to get to know each other. We kind of had breakout rooms. And it was a chance to talk about the impact of CRIISP to that point, and some of the challenges and successes of being a public contributor. So that was a really useful event. And before I pass to Joe, I just want to talk a little more about the impact of CRIISP. And we were just so fortunate to have this group of people who could share their lived experience, and it really helped the researchers shape the research, make it meaningful, make it relevant to those people who it was focused on. Some of our public contributors contributed to interview questions. So one of the researchers was out in the field doing ethnographic research, and at one of the meetings she brought some of the questions that she'd been using when she was talking to people, and it was a chance for our public contributors to think about whether there were any gaps, anything else she should be asking, perhaps different ways of asking questions, and that was a really useful meeting. They contributed to pain-related questions in one of the databases that Carolyn talked about. It's a database, a longitudinal study, and it has lots of questions, but not pain-related, so they were able to feed into that. Have input on survey questions on one of the research projects, and testing technology. So Carolyn mentioned some of this, and for example, a group tested a smartwatch, which was to capture the sort of physical activity and maybe sleep, and to help really learn about pain in the wild, so out there in real life. And it was great for our public contributors to try that out, to feedback about the experience, so that it could go on to be used, and is used in one of the research studies. Some people wrote blogs, and there's a link there to one of the blogs. There's lots of blogs on the CRIISP website. It's well worth a look. And co-presented at conferences. So in that picture there, you can see Ian, who's our chair, in the green shirt, and he was joining us at the European Pain Congress in Budapest, presenting a poster. And then I mentioned our publication. There's a link to it and an image there, which contains far more information than I can share with you. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that. And I'm going to now hand over to you, Joe.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Thanks for everybody listening. Yeah, so I just wanted to really discuss what we've learned. And on this slide, we start looking at those key lessons. So one thing we've really learned is the importance of flexibility. So people joined from kitchen tables, bedrooms, sometimes with cats walking across the screen. Life was happening around us, but we just kept showing up. Sometimes contributors needed to step away, which they did, and I know Sharon's mentioned this. It might have been for health or caring, or really just for a breather, and that was absolutely fine. And they told us they were stepping away, and then when they were ready to come back, they came back. But overall, I did find that it was quite a consistent contribution throughout. And I think though having that space to pause and come back when ready helped people stay involved long term. As you know, it was a very long-term project, as Carolyn's already mentioned. And we also saw how strong equal relationships between researchers and public contributors made a real difference. So when you invest in time and building trust, involvement becomes much more meaningful. Finally, we didn't just assume we got it right, we kept checking. So feedback from both contributors and researchers helped us learn a lot and adapt, and we adapted as we, kept going and strengthened how we worked together right through to the end. Next slide, please. So following on from that, we learned the importance of having public contributors at the executive level. It's how you create synergy, identify opportunities and risks early, and make sure that involvement isn't sidelined, it's central. So that was Ian, who is the chair of the Consortium Public Advisory Group, who couldn't make it here tonight. And that was also myself. I'm the vice chair of the Consortium Public Advisory Group. So we've also learned that PPI doesn't just support research, it turbocharges it. It boosts the quality of input and improves the relevance of what comes out. So we've learned how important it is to value people's knowledge and the influence that they have, not just by paying them fairly, but by embedding their contributions in the research itself, not just by inviting them in, but building it with them. So we've learned to stay flexible, to keep looking backhand, looking ahead together, and so that infrastructure keeps working, not just at the start of the project, but right the way through and right the way through to the end. Could I have the next slide, please?
Jo, it's not moving. I might have to stop sharing and start again.
Okay, that's great. It's slide 15, Sharon.
Okay.
While Sharon's going to reshare, we'll just have a bit of a breather. It's a lot of information to take in.
It should have moved on now, I
That's the
hope.
one. Yeah, great. Thank you. So on this slide, we're really looking at what our public contributors say and how they felt as they've gone along. As Carolyn said, it's been a very long time. And I think I'd just like to point out one here. I feel involvement has helped me build my resilience to pain, as some of the research has been personally relevant to my condition. And it's great to work with such a group coming together and help others. People really felt valued, and not just valued, they knew they were part of the team, and we just built that relationship as we went over the years. And some people hadn't done public contribution before, and they want to continue doing it now. So that's really quite successful, I think. Next slide, please. It's not moving at the
Done the
moment.
same again. I'm
So
going to
it's
stop
slide
and start.
16.
Yeah. Right. Hopefully that's there.
Yes, it's the next one. Oh, great. Thank you. Yep. So what did our public contributors say? So they've said quite a few things, and this is just some of them. CRIISP has been a real partnership, an equal partnership. And that's exactly what this slide captures, I feel. We asked our public contributors, what would you say to someone thinking of getting involved in research? And they told us all of this. So I love that one. Top left-hand corner, go for it. They also said, you are an expert by experience, because people are often, and I've heard this, and they, as soon as they started getting into it and knew that they were there for their lived experience, that anxiety, it goes away. So I think it's about really advertising it correctly, just to make sure that they know they don't have to have, that academic knowledge. They also said things like their voice counts and this is your opportunity to make a change. And I think that these are not just sound bites, they reflect the deeper foundations of CRIISP, that shared learning, respect and support. And this is the way of work. This kind of working has underpinned everything we did right from the very start in chronic pain research, from shaping the research to methods to interpretations of the findings. And it reminded us that chronic pain isn't just a clinical problem or a research question, it's a human one. And understanding it properly meant hearing from those who live with it. We built this culture, we made this work. So next slide, please.
Gosh, I'm going to just have to keep stopping and starting, Jo.
It's slide 17.
Yeah, there we are.
Lovely, thank you. So what did our researchers say? So this slide highlights what researchers noticed and experienced. And here's what our researchers said about working alongside public contributors in CRIISP. So one of the strongest messages here was that the experience had completely shifted their view of how research can and should happen. And it wasn't just involvement added on, it transformed how they approached their work. And one researcher reflected on the power of consistency, saying having the same people throughout has led to more depth, understanding, a richer and more meaningful discussions. So I think that's really great. I think the slides have left the screen now for the moment, but I'll just carry on for the moment. And I think Sharon will share this. Sorry, it's a bit glitchy. Yeah, so the illustrations in the blue panel in the middle, the researchers said that they were surprised by how connected, insightful and interested contributors were, and how much that challenged and stretched their thinking in a good way. And on the right, so the orange picture there, the orange infographic, when asked to sum up the experience or their experience in just one word, they said valuable, effective, insightful, balanced, refreshing, questioning, innovative. And these aren't just nice words, they're evidence of how much researchers value and valued public contribution throughout CRIISP and how it improved the work. So I think that's really, really powerful. Next slide, please, slide 18. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about the legacy, outputs and sharing, the learning, and it's our final slide about that. So really would be great if you have the time to look up CRIISP and look at the website. There's a lot on there and you'll find blogs from everyone involved in CRIISP, not everyone, but throughout the programme, varied members of the programme, and namely one that's noted here is From Personal Struggle to Public Advocacy. My experience with chronic pain and CRIISP, and that was one of our public contributors. You'll also spot a paper published in Health Expectations called Outlining the Learnings from CRIISP. And to summarise, this is what's possible when people with lived experience are truly part of research from the beginning. So I just want to thank you so much for listening and really to invite any questions or comments.
I think people have been asked to put questions in the Q&A box if they have any.
I would love to ask a question if that's all right, team. That was amazing and so impressive. So what advice can you give to people that we can try to replicate this on a sort of UK scale? That would be ideal, wouldn't it? And what amazing outcomes from that. But how could we take this forward to actually make it more tangible and more realistic for everybody to be able to do? Is it about the infrastructure? Is it about the support from institution? Like, you know, what are your key learnings from this that we could take away and hopefully apply?
I mean, I can start off, but I think actually, Jo, it's all of the above. So it is starting off when you've got a research idea. Hopefully it's been generated with public input. Certainly if you decide that you as a researcher have an idea, then take it out early for discussion with people with lived experience of that clinical condition. We're very lucky that we had Colin contributing to our application. So right from the start, we had the public voice. We had public co-applicants, and I think that's really important. And then key for me is getting a budget that is realistic, rather than thinking, oh, well, I can make some cuts here because I want to get it funded. There's no point getting a project funded if you haven't got a sufficient budget for good patient and public involvement. And we certainly did have. And then, I mean, I think I'll hand over to Jo and Sharon, but I think then once you start your work, it's integrating your lived experience voice into every stage of the research, whether it's a very small project or a big program of work like this. Sharon, Joanne, you might want to take over and add some things to that.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Jo? Or
Yeah, that'd be. Oh, thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I think to add on to that, you've got to really kind of mean what you say, and certainly CRIISP did. We've had public involvement at every single stage, and it's not been tokenistic at all. They've been part of the team. They knew that, and I mean, just recently we had a showcase, and we had a good turnout of public contributors to that. And there's just been huge commitment, and I think it's about organising that efficiently and just letting them know that they are part of the team, because otherwise, you know, it would put people off. So I think what Carolyn said, all of that, and then on top, you've got to really mean what you say and put it into practice. Sharon, did you want to add on to that?
I was just thinking about you know, maintaining that engagement and having, it was kind of a balance between offering events and, you know, the workshops, some training. We had, for example, we paid for some external training to upskill or to, you know, refresh people so that they could take on a chairing role. We had, you know, lots of events, lots of activities and opportunities throughout, but it was also about recognizing these are people, as we, you know, we all are, the researchers and the public contributors, who also have other commitments, other lives. So I think flexibility was really key, and being able to adapt to individuals, and you know, allowing them to pause, you know, and that was completely fine and completely comfortable, I hope. So yeah, we had a real balance of providing lots of opportunities for involvement, but also flexibility where it was needed. So I think balance was a key thing for me. And having a named contact, having someone, you know, we really got to know our public contributors so that they could just drop us an email and recognise that, you know, many of us were part-time on the project, but they knew who to contact, and we built that kind of relationship, which I think was really helpful.
Yeah,
Perhaps one more thing is about the researchers sometimes need training or support or education in how to use people with lived experience in the best possible way, how to make them feel included. So it isn't all one way. It isn't all about training the people with lived experience. It's about training the whole research team to really value the lived experience contribution. And I think we saw a shift in CRIISP of right at the beginning. Perhaps there were some teams who thought, well, you know, we're working on data. The data's been collected already. It's we've got our questions. We perhaps don't need any other input. But actually, people with lived experience, the people in those work package groups, were able to influence the questions that were asked of the data, but possibly more importantly, what their findings meant. You know, it's not just a peer review publication, it's actually, what does it mean for the person with pain? What does it mean for a clinician or a practitioner?
Yeah, and
And
something
what
that I just wanted to mention as well was after each work development group, and we had many over the years, we always had a debrief. And then we checked in with the public contributors, myself and Ian, and that's how we managed to adapt from that, how we ran the sessions, as well as using the consortium public advisory group, which we had every 3 months. And researchers came to that and actually presented some of the research from other work development groups that the co-chairs didn't see. So they actually kept up to date with the research throughout the programme, and I think that was really important. And we've also got a question in the chat about top tips. What top tips do you have about managing public contributors' expectations as the project comes to an end? And that's something that we really were aware of. It was a long project, and we were hearing, maybe 6 months prior to the end, that people were actually a little bit sad that it was ending. And I think we all were, but we're all also really thankful that we were able to do it, and grateful that we had all of this research being analysed and that it could be used in the future. But what was really important, that we managed those expectations for public contributors as we were coming to the end, and we just kept checking in, letting them know how much time we had left. And we had those certain events, including the showcase about a month ago now, and I think that it just prepared people, and I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Joe. And I think it was really important, as Joe says, to prepare people. So we're still, the project will end from at the end of the certainly the public involvement elements will end very soon. And it was a good 6 months ago, maybe more, that we started building that into the meetings and letting people know, letting them know what the steps would be, working towards the end of their involvement, how, even practical things like when to expect the last payments, how who to get in contact if they had any questions, and about next steps of where the research was going to go. Because I think lots of people had questions, and perhaps, sometimes thought, right, now I'm going to go to my doctor, it will be very different, this research will have changed everything. And so there was a lot of work about managing expectations with that wasn't going to happen. This is a process. It can take many years, but it's one of the steps, and a lot of the results from these studies will inform future research. There might be opportunities for them to be involved in that. But it was about really being open and transparent about what to expect from this project. So we've done a lot of work around that, answering questions, to really hopefully make people comfortable with the fact that their involvement in this will be ending, but hopefully has given them, as Joe described earlier, a real taste for continuing in other projects.
And we did give them a little gift at the end, didn't we?
We
To remember
did.
CRIISP Bay.
Yeah, which was really lovely, and I think we really wanted to do that. We thought, oh, it'd be nice for them to just have something to remember this experience. Yeah.
A lovely engraved water bottle with CRIISP written on it. And so really they can't forget about, all of the things that they've done and how far they've come. And I mean, there was one comment from a public contributor that said that it had helped him with his pain. It helped improve his pain. I think if you go on the CRIISP website, you'll be able to read about things like that, because there is a blog on there that explains quite a few things about how that came about. So that'd be really good if you could. Are there any more questions? You could, I think there's a Q&A box that you can put them in.
I would love
Or
to ask something else if that's all right, Joe. Sorry, this has been so incredibly interesting, and it's really exciting to see that what happens when people work together to help people living with pain. It's really inspiring. And I wonder if you have any takeaways on how we can translate that research into a pathway into the clinical services and to really make that impact. It's not an easy question, but how can we ensure the research reaches the real world?
I think that's a really key question, isn't it? And Sharon's already intimated that perhaps some of our public contributors thought that, you know, on January the 1st, 2026, things would be different. And we know that it can take 10 to 15 years for research to get into practice. What we're trying to do is shorten that. So we do have a work package which is around impact, that's sort of one on the left-hand side, integrating all the findings, distilling the key messages, because whilst everybody's working on their peer-reviewed publications, which are really important for the institution, we have to remember that there are also key messages for individuals with pain, but key messages for clinicians, and can we get those out there before things appear in guidelines? And so using things like infographics, going to clinical conferences to get our messages out, I think that's all important. But actually bridging that implementation gap is really difficult. And I don't think CRIISP has given us the answer to that. But lots of institutions, lots of universities do have implementation accelerator units, so that they try and take research and think, let's try and get some impact now, rather than waiting for it to, you know, appear in a nice guideline 5-10 years down the line. But it's a really good question, Jo, and it can be quite frustrating for researchers, I think, when they feel that they've made a step forward, but actually nothing changes clinically.
It takes time, but I think the impact has to start somewhere, and I think it's starting in research, for sure. I think it's really fantastic work. So sorry, I have so many questions. Thank you so much for answering.
No, that's great, Jo. And I think as well, you know, the research is going to be there and people can build on that as well. And, you know, maybe put in other funding applications and then build on it from there. So, and at the showcase, we did have UKRI and we had Rheumatoid Arthritis there as well. So, you know, they've got the message, the public contributors have got the message and can all direct to the website as well, which will be open for another 3 years. So, you know, you can keep an eye on that, see if anything else happens along the way. And I think, you know, that's where we're at the moment. But I can see that there's another question in the chat. So did you meet in person at any time? What the benefits and challenges of this? So what are the benefits and challenges? So we did meet in person, Carolyn, didn't we?
Yeah, so we had, as Sharon said, quite a lot of our work was done online, particularly during the COVID restrictions, but also we've more recently had some in-person meetings, including the showcase that was mentioned at the beginning of October, to go through all the sort of findings of all the work packages. I mean, Jo and Sharon probably a better place to talk about the benefits. I think the challenges are that actually we're all used to working online and therefore it's slightly easier. But also, some people with pain might find it easy because it's difficult to travel 3 hours on a train to get to a meeting in the south of England. So I think there are some benefits of working online, but there are undoubted benefits of meeting face to face. I think you establish relationships, you can put a face to the name, or a body to the name and face. And so I think those in-person meetings did give us more of a sense of cohesion. But that would be my view.
Yeah, just to add to that, so we had the recent showcase where we invited all our public contributors to attend, and myself and Ellen, our fabulous administrator, were working hard to get people there if they wanted to be there. I think, the benefits of online is that it's very equal. Everyone can come. We could certainly support them to access the technology. I think the problems with face-to-face was that for some people it was difficult. As Carolyn says, they may be, you know, having a long journey, but even practicalities such as finding parking, that for disabled parking, or the blue card parking for a long enough duration to attend the meeting. And some places are not set up for that, and it can be a real challenge, and we work really hard to try and find that facility, but it's not easy, which is wrong, and it shouldn't be like that, but it is. I think the benefit was that you could really see the relationships between our public contributors really growing in that room. And we'd had reconnect sessions, we'd had breakout rooms, we'd tried to really facilitate that through the project. But there was definitely, you know, there was something about meeting in person, and you could see those relationships really gelling and hopefully, you know, sustaining. And yeah, so I guess it was great to offer that at the end. And you know, we worked hard to give a couple of nights accommodation to people, and, you know, obviously pay for them to attend in terms of, you know, travel, etc. But I think it did make me reflect on the fact that it was a huge amount of work to get them there, and, you know, some of those energies may be better spent in other things. Also, you know, not everyone could come, so it wasn't terribly equal. And I think that an occasional face-to-face, you know, would be fine. But I think it really made me think how much more we could get done, how much more accessible we were to have online meetings. So yeah, it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well, most of the public contribute. I mean, they were all over the country, and most of them would not have been able to meet in person regularly, even every 3 or 6 months. It just wasn't possible for them. And you know, to be able to meet online for myself as well, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I think everybody was really happy with being able to do it online. It was really convenient, and you know, they could have a break. We always had a break during the meetings, and we had that debriefing session as well. But generally the consensus was no to meeting regularly anyway, in the situation with chronic pain. But at the very end, they some of them made such a massive effort, coming from all areas around the UK and spending many hours on a train, because they were committed to the project and they really, really wanted to meet, you know, just in person at the end to thank everybody and to celebrate.
So there's a question, Joe, about communicating complex research findings in an accessible way. And I think that's a really good question. And this is back to my point about the researchers needing to learn to do that. That I think as researchers, we tend to speak in jargon, we tend to make assumptions that everybody knows what we're talking about. And that wasn't the case in CRIISP. So as I say, we had a glossary of terms, some sort of explanations of what the commonest terms that would be used within research meetings. But then we did spend time with the researchers talking about the need to break ideas down. And I guess one of the key things was, before they had the work package meetings, there was a pre-meeting. So the researchers could go through a presentation or an infographic or whatever they wanted to discuss at the meeting, just to make sure that it was accessible. And again, that took a bit of getting used to, I think, on the part of the researchers, because this was another step, and maybe they didn't necessarily think that it was something they had to do, but by the end, they valued it. Joe, you might want to add to that.
Yeah. To add on to that as
Yeah.
well, so what we did in that pre-meeting was we set out an agenda. So the co-chairs of that work development group, and the vice chair or chair, and the researchers attended that meeting and really thought about where we were at, what we wanted to discuss, you know, what information there was that potentially went out as a pre-read or pre-work. And we looked at all of that alongside the co-chairs as a joint kind of partnership again. And we sent that out 2 weeks beforehand. And again, it's Sharon, and we also had Noreen, and they were both really sending those things out to the public contributors in advance of the meeting. So they knew exactly what they were going to be looking at in the meetings. And that really helped, because some of the topics, yes, they were complex, but they were able to be broken down into lay terminology and explained really well before the meeting. And then when you got to the meeting, you were prepared. That was really good. And there was no expectation, however, to do the pre-work if they couldn't do it. Things were still explained at the meeting. And if necessary, we did post-work afterwards as well.
I think just to reinforce here, you can see when we're telling the story of CRIISP, how important it is to go back to Carolyn's point. You need the budget, and my top tip to anybody that's considering public, well, that's definitely including, no consideration about it, is including public involvement in their research. Cost it out properly. Make sure you've got the budget. And from my experience, funders are expecting this now. They expect there to be a budget for public involvement. And actually, if there isn't, they'd probably come back and say, well, how are you going to do this? So I would, I think hopefully there are some really key messages from today, but I think really bring the, have a realistic budget that can take into account maybe these additional meetings and all of the things we've been describing, really. So yeah, budget's key.
And I think to add on to that as well, the groups that we had, the work development groups, they weren't huge groups. We had between 6 and 8 public contributors, and that actually included the co-chairs, of which we had 2 in each work development group. So there was enough time for everyone to be able to, put comments in. We all got to know each other really well. So initially we were putting our hands up, and we still kind of carried that on as we went through. But we had respect for each other and each other's comments. Even if people didn't always agree, there might be a bit of a debate over it, but it was a good debate and productive. And I think it's about building that relationship. And, as Sharon said, if you have the budget, you have time to then have that trust to be built up. I'm just looking out for any other questions.
Don't think there are any other questions.
Nothing in the Q&A at the moment. Check the chat. Should we just wait a few minutes to see if there are any more questions or anything else we can think of that would be helpful? I'd definitely recommend going onto the CRIISP website.
We've obviously stunned everybody.
Yeah,
I think it's been a lot of information, and yeah, you can see the passion. Thanks, Joe, for putting the website link there in the chat. And actually as well, remember that this is recorded, so if you wanted to go back and watch any part of it, then please do. Joe, it'll be on YouTube on the BPS side.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get that shared with everyone on the YouTube channel.
Great. Thank you. I think we're happy to wait a little bit longer, Joe, just in case there are any other questions. But if not, we could maybe let everybody go, have the rest of their evening, maybe even their evening meal if they haven't had it yet. Okay, great. Well, I think, Sharon, Carolyn, do you think we should end it there and say thank you?
that sounds good. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks to everybody. And we've got a comment there from Philippa saying about the valuable insights. You're more than welcome. Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Everyone.
Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.